Welcome back, one and all, to another episode of The Damage Report with me, John Iadarola, and joining us to break down not only the news that stretches from the West Coast to the East Coast, but with all of our eyes on Texas, we needed to bring in our Texas expert. I almost turned that into like an expertress, because that would have worked with Texas.
Okay.
But it's too late for that. Yas is here, everybody. Yasmin Khan. How's it going?
Hi. Bringing you all the news from the Gulf of America coast. Here we are.
Yeah, you are actually very close to the Gulf of America. Do you feel more patriotic when you gaze over the rippling waters?
The waters are less rippling than not. The water is also brown here in Galveston. So the sense of patriotism really comes from seeing all of the oil tankers on the horizon. And you're like, yes, this is America. This is America.
Honestly, the funny thing is, like, I would love to mock Texas for like just filling the water up with oil tankers, but you go to California, like on the beach, you go to Santa Monica Pier, you look out, you see ships that are doing
that's
oil.
Sad, because at least that's a Pacific Ocean, like that is majestic in and of itself, and your water is blue. Here, it kind of fits the rest of the environment,
Exactly. Here, it's mostly blue. It's filled with oil and great white sharks. And so for those two reasons, I never go in the water. I don't need to. But anyway, we are very happy to have you here, because in just a minute, we're actually going to be launching into our updates on what's going on with Texas and the Democrats' attempts to fight the radical gerrymandering going on there. In response to that, federal government apparently getting ready to do something even more radical, so prepare yourself for that. We're then going to jump into updates on the Epstein story and the cover-up of it. Donald Trump being asked about some of the recent reporting over Vance figuring out how he can aid in the cover-up, and Donald Trump loses his goddamn mind. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. And then we have to talk about Chris Cuomo falling for like the most obvious deep fake ever of AOC. Like, I honestly feel a little bit bad. Like, I almost don't even want to make fun of him for it. Don't worry, I'm going to, but I almost don't want to, because it's such an obvious deep fake that I'm like, is there something going on? My grandfather, who passed away like 10 years ago, would have been like, this seems suspicious, I think. And yet, Chris fell for it. So anyway, we're gonna be talking about that and a whole lot more besides. We got so much. We gotta talk about JD Vance having rivers raised for his aquatic pleasure, and a whole lot more besides that. So hit the like button, share the stream, send us your comments or tweets or super chats. You might earn yourself a Blueprint gift card, and even if not, you might earn yourself the honor of having your comment be read aloud during our social break. But with all that said, Yaz, you ready to do this thing?
Yes, absolutely. A lot of great stories that I'm excited to dive into today.
Let's dive into it then, starting with your home state. Texas Senator John Cornyn has asked FBI Director Kash Patel, looking as shocked as we are that he's in that position, in that picture, for his help in tracking down, arresting, and I guess carting back the Democrats who have temporarily left Texas to stop the ridiculous and arguably unconstitutional gerrymander that Texas wants to do. And that was crazy. That was the news of yesterday. No, the crazy update today is that he's approved the request, Kash Patel. I don't know what that means. There's no more details. Maybe the Democrats have already been arrested. Maybe they've already been thrown in the back of a Penske truck to be hauled back to Austin. We don't know. We're trying to figure it out. All that we have is this statement from John Cornyn, who says, I am proud to announce that Director Kash Patel has approved my request for the FBI to assist state and local law enforcement in locating runaway Texas House Democrats. I thank President Trump and Director Patel for supporting and swiftly acting on my call for the federal government to hold these supposed lawmakers accountable for fleeing Texas. John Cornyn, of course, was quite quiet when Ted Cruz had fled Texas during those devastating storms, but whatever, he's found someone that he can get mad at, I guess. And so as of right now, I don't know what any of this means. I don't know if FBI agents have been dispatched. I don't know if they're even free to track down these Democrats. I'm pretty sure a lot of them are busy redacting Donald Trump's name from the Epstein files, but in theory, they could be arrested. And so maybe nothing happens, or maybe this is us taking another another step down a really dark path towards the constant weaponization of the FBI against Donald Trump and his regime and his various toadies and lackeys like John Cornyn, like Kash Patel, like Greg Abbott and Ken Paxton, in just arresting anyone that temporarily inconveniences them. So I don't know for sure, but I want to turn now to our Texas representative. Yas, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously kind of crazy. And I know we're going to talk about this a little bit more later on in the story, but John Cornyn is currently, he's up for reelection in the upcoming midterms. So right now we're already here in Texas starting to see campaign ads for John Cornyn. And part of his ad strategy is to show how well in alignment he is with Trump and with the Trump administration. I just saw an ad yesterday and it was saying, oh, John Cornyn, he votes with Trump 99% of the time or something like that, some 90 something percent number. So he's really trying to drive that point home that he is a MAGA candidate. And part of the reason as to why he is doing that, I would imagine, is because part of Ken Paxton's campaign for Cornyn's Senate seat is to claim that Cornyn is not as MAGA as he should be. And it's kind of disappointing for me. Well, obviously it's disappointing for me on a few different levels, but the race between Cornyn and Paxton, I thought it could be kind of like a benchmark to see where the people of Texas really were, right? John Cornyn is very Republican. He's very conservative. He's not as outspoken as Ted Cruz is. He doesn't have as much of a public profile, but he really is. He does vote a lot with Trump and with the Trump administration. So he's not like anybody that I'm comfortable having represent me either way. But his perception is that of, maybe a more old school Republican, like I wouldn't say quite John McCain Republican, but he's, he's like an upstanding guy. He's conservative. He's not making a whole lot of waves. He just does his work and puts his head down. He's not like Ted Cruz on a podcast, like there's there's a big difference between our two Texas senators. But yeah. Ken Paxton, he has a reputation on the national stage, which is saying something for a state attorney general. It's not a good reputation, but he's got one. So he has name recognition, but he's also just like known to be very sycophantic for Trump and for MAGA. And for him to come out and say that John Cornyn, who does vote with Trump most of the time, is not MAGA enough, that is a big selling point, or it could be. So, I was thinking that could be a benchmark to see where the people of Texas actually sat, if they were sick of all the MAGA stuff and just wanted to go back to what they perceived to be a more traditional Republican path, or if they would, continue down this more extreme MAGA path. And like I said, I know we're gonna get to it more, but we'll see how that's shaking out here in Texas.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's going to end up very good for Texas either way. That you either get John Cornyn, whose campaign strategy is, "Hey Texans, I'm barely a person. I have no free will, no agency. I just asked ChatGPT what would Trump do in this case, and then I just do that." Yeah. I want to reassure you, whether you're in Houston or down in the valley, I will never think for myself. I swear to God, just please keep me in this position. And that seems really sad for any state, let alone for Texas, where they're supposed to be all big and macho and independent.
Cowboys,
just being like, yeah, I know. How pathetic. And by the way, like if you ever had an aura of having any either sense or independence or devotion to country over party, let alone politician, like you're gonna try to arrest a bunch of people for temporarily inconveniencing you as your state legislature pushes for redistricting that you weren't calling for. Like it wasn't even your idea. It was just Donald Trump's. It's so pathetic what has happened to both Texas and the Republican Party. But in addition to the stuff with the FBI, you've got Ken Paxton, who now, like you said, they all want to seem like they're the most deferential and the most authoritarian, let's be clear, is now investigating Beto O'Rourke for raising money for the group, saying you're bankrolling them. It's bribery, it's illegal. And I love that, like, they've never had a problem with any fundraising, even when it's explicit bribery. I mean, they're all cheering Donald Trump being given a $400 million plane or whatever, but Beto O'Rourke, He's bankrolling. He should definitely be behind bars. Because at the end of the day, all of this is about stealing as much representation as possible and locking up as many Democrats as possible. That is all they have to offer to their base. And in response to that, Beto O'Rourke put out a statement saying the guy impeached for bribery, talking about Ken Paxton, who obviously faced corruption concerns from whistleblowers, is going after the folks trying to stop the theft of 5 congressional seats. Let's stop these thugs before they steal our country. And I hope that they're successful. I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know. We had Representative John Busey III on. Maybe by next week he'll be behind bars, because that's unfortunately the kind of country we live in at this point. And finally, just maybe you could respond to this, Yaz. The Democrats in Illinois who were sheltering there, they had to leave their hotel after a bomb threat against it.
Wow.
And we don't know for sure it's because of those Democrats, but I don't know. I've been paying attention to politics the last couple of years. It feels like there might be a connection, but what do you make of all this in terms of the redistricting side?
Okay, well, first of all, with Ken Paxton, if anyone knows about bribery and fraud, it is Ken Paxton. He is the Texas State Attorney General. He is the highest ranking law enforcement agent in the state, but he's also the most legally embattled AG in the country himself, right? So this is a man who was being investigated by other Texas Republicans for corruption. And during the investigation, a literal dumpster was on fire outside of his office. So that is the guy who is now going to investigate Beto O'Rourke of all people for fraud and corruption. So I do want to say, as far as the the gerrymandering and the Democrats fleeing the office, there's a lot of things going on right now. Governor Abbott is on Fox News saying that these Democrats are the ones who are blocking aid to the Kerrville victims. That's not true. And that was in response to a question as to why the Democrats have fled. And he just barely mentioned redistricting in his answer. He knows that that's the reason why they have fled and why they're denying quorum, but he doesn't want to focus on that. It's also just like the fact that it's happening in the middle of a decade is unprecedented. It's unheard of. Who is doing this? No one else is doing this. And the reason why he's doing it is also very obvious. It is for Trump. The Texas Democrats, though, they have fled to various states, Illinois and New York, Massachusetts, I think Michigan, some other places. And the thing is, Texas Democrats are no joke, okay? To be a Democrat in the state of Texas, you have to be on top of your game. And we were kind of talking about this, John, before the show, but just being here locally, going to local meetings of Democrats here, the people, the candidates that come out willing to challenge Texas Republicans, they're at the top of their game. They are educated, they are experienced, they are experts in their field, they're well-spoken, they have well-defined policies and plans for what they want to do for the people of Texas. And so often you see such, highly qualified candidates just get kicked out of the race by some, whatever Republican just because they, say that they're with MAGA or they're with Trump or whatever, and it's Texas. And ultimately, this is already a very highly gerrymandered state. It's about to be even more gerrymandered if Republicans get their way. And just the people that we have here, the Democrats, they are of a very, very high caliber. I will say that much. And you're seeing that a little bit now as some of them are starting to make more appearances on a national level. And they've looked into the legality. These people are not a group of people who are going to flee to other states without having looked at every angle, without having explored everything that the Republicans could throw at them as part of their response. And Beto O'Rourke, I want to just take a minute to defend him because I think he gets a lot of flack. I think he can be kind of corny sometimes, but when it comes to politics in this country and policy and just being a person, that is really not the worst thing that you can be. And Beto O'Rourke, even though he doesn't even hold an office right now, he has done so much for the people of Texas, even in between the times when he's running for various positions, right? It is sad that he doesn't win ever, but he has come dangerously close to doing so in the past, and that is nothing to make light of.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. And I get your frustration too, that you can have these people who are great, and then they get beat because Texas Republican or whatever. They want someone anti-corruption like Ken Paxton who took bribes, and they want someone with traditional religious values like Ken Paxton who had an affair and is getting divorced as a result of it. They just want those sorts of people. They're principled people, Yaz. You need to understand that. Anyway, let's talk about some of those principles and how they've intersected with one of the biggest stories of the last month or so. Let's launch into this.
Mr. President, is Vice President Vance hosting a gathering this evening to talk about how to respond to the Epstein situation?
Is he working on what?
Is he hosting some kind of gathering of top advisors this evening to talk about how to respond to the Epstein situation?
I don't know. I could ask you that question. I don't know of it, but I think here's the man right here.
I saw it reported today, and it's completely fake news. We're not meeting to talk about the Epstein situation, and I think the reporter who reported it needs to get better sources.
Look, the whole thing is a hoax. It's put out by the Democrats because we've had the most successful 6 months in the history of our country. And that's just a way of trying to divert attention to something that's total bullshit. Okay?
Total bull ass. That's what it is. So just, if that's something you care about, Jeffrey Epstein and his decades-long trail of victims and Ghislaine Maxwell, who might soon be walking free, you're following a trail of BS is what you're doing. Why the hell are you so stupid? Why do you care about this thing? It's boring and it's a hoax and it's fake. And Donald Trump is not pretending to care about this one quantum more than he was a month ago. And that reporting, which was definitely true, that JD Vance was going to be getting together Pam Bondi and Patel and all of them to figure out, what do we do about this thing? We can't get a grasp on it. It was totally true. But they're just laughing. Oh, the reporting, like we're gonna do that. You think we're gonna meet to talk about this? We're not gonna talk about this. We don't care about this. And they are lying there, but it's pretty true. Donald Trump said it was total bull ass, and he was mad. He was actually emotional. He was more emotional than he has ever been in condemning Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell. He was more emotional there than he ever was about like any sort of pursuit of justice for the victims. And so he cares 1,000 times more about the fact that you're being mean to him by bringing this up than you are in wanting to know what actually happened and who might still be out there on the loose, maybe still victimizing people. Donald Trump doesn't care about that, and he's not even pretending to. And so they're all going with the story that now the dinner last night, the strategy dinner, wasn't true. The communications director for Vance says it's pure fiction. There was never a supposed meeting or whatever. And the thing is, there's no reason for anyone to believe a claim that they make. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, they have been lying to your face in transparent ways for far too long for you to extend them any belief that they could potentially be telling the truth now. And so what they were gonna be doing was figuring out, what do we do about this? So should we hold a press conference with Todd Blanche? Should we do an interview with like Joe Rogan or whatever? These are definitely conversations they're having. It is ridiculous for them to lie about it. And the only reason they backed off and supposedly didn't have it, and I'm sure they're gonna have it in some form, is because it looked so bad. In part because the family, Virginia Jeffrey, actually put out a statement as a result of that reporting saying, we understand that JD Vance will hold a strategy session this evening at his residence. Missing from this group is, of course, any survivor of the vicious crimes of convicted perjurer and sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. Their voices must be heard above all. We also call upon the House subcommittee to invite survivors to testify. But the issue is, their voices are not being heard and their voices are not wanted. Has Donald Trump ever brought one of them into the Oval Office? He made us listen to what, Elon Musk, how many times? Just wasting our time with that. Has he ever met with the victims? Has he ever talked to them? Does he even pretend to care about them? The only time he mentioned any of these individuals was to pitch himself as the victim, that they stole my employee. I had a perfectly good 16-year-old working in my massage parlor that I was individually aware of. I knew about this 16-year-old for some reason. I have thousands of employees, but I knew about this 16-year-old in a massage parlor, and I was so mad about him stealing this human from me that I cut off my relationship. Of course, that's a lie. He maintained that relationship for like 4 to 6 years after that, but that's the story he would have you believe. And now I want to bring you in, Yaz. What do you think about I don't know, what are we in, week 3, week 4 of the terrible response to this scandal?
Yeah, I actually covered this for Rebel HQ just now. But yeah, this is funny to me. First of all, you're absolutely right. There is no reason to believe anything they tell you at this point. They first tried to make Maxwell seem like an unreliable witness, which of course she is. She's lied under oath. We know that. But this was back when they were scared that she would reveal some kind of damning information that would incriminate Republicans or Trump or, all of them. But then they send Todd Blanche to see her in prison. And next thing you know, she's been moved to Texas to a facility that she's not even eligible for because the crimes that she has been convicted of, not accused of, but convicted of, were so heinous, right? And now she's just at one of these, resort type prisons here in Texas, not too far away from where I am. And, so we've seen a lot of waffling from them here and there. Then there's that dinner that JD Vance was hosting, because what they need now is they need a united front, right? They have to get ahead of the messaging. Everything else they've tried so far has not worked to kill this story. So how can they do it? Let's strategize a little bit. And so what they're doing, I think AG Pam Bondi was there and Kash Patel, and you mentioned some people, but they were all there discussing how they can best do this and how they can get on message, stay on message, and then, convey that message to their base. And it was either a press conference or go on Joe Rogan's podcast. And it's funny to me that those two things are like kind of at the same level as far as like, how they can best reach the people. But honestly, if they go on Rogan's podcast, they would be reaching, a more targeted aspect of the base that they're trying to reach. If they do a press conference, then everyone would kind of see that. If they go on Joe Rogan, a very specific subset of people is watching Joe Rogan regularly and would watch the entire episode. But the thing is, Joe Rogan right now is kind of a wrench in their plan, because he is part of the reason as to why this story hasn't died yet. He's the one who keeps asking, why won't they release the tapes? Why won't they release the unredacted tapes? Why did they say that there's nothing else for them to release? And he's the one who is very much keeping the story alive for that part of the base. And Trump can't really afford to lose that part of the base, because that part of the base arguably got him elected in November. Right before the election, he went on his, his press spree where he was doing all these podcast appearances. He appealed to Gen Z, specifically to Gen Z men. And now a lot of Gen Z has turned their backs on him, and he's seeing that happen. So the fact that they want to target Joe Rogan for something like this, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, and it'll be fascinating if they do it. Joe Rogan has been, he's been somewhat consistent in terms of the criticism of this. If he helps them launder this thing, that's going to be that's a bad look for Joe Rogan. But they need it, and we're going to go on just a little bit more. I just want to cover a couple more aspects of this before we break. Let's jump now to why do the strategy session. So. Although the Trump administration pretends they weren't going to do this little dinner meeting where they figure out how to finally get this cover up of the Epstein thing on track, there's a reason they need to do that, is because people are not buying it. Even Republicans, not enough Republicans, but even Republicans aren't buying it. So Americans are far more likely to disapprove than approve of Trump's handling of the investigation right now. Only 20% of the American public approves of it. 37% of Republicans, though, and if you're one of those Republicans, like, God damn, you got no principles, man. Or you're just asleep, or you only get your news from Fox News, where they talked. I think they used last week. They used Sydney Sweeney's name on Fox News 100 times more than Jeffrey Epstein's. Do you know that? There was a Media Matters analysis. And maybe that's why you think that he's doing a bang up job in this transparent cover up. But even for them, their approval of it has fallen over time. And so at the beginning of this, the Republican approval versus disapproval was +20. That's dropped to just +7. So he's losing them to some extent. US citizens in general are down to -40 on approval. Democrats -80. And so he's losing everyone over time because there's more questions and no new answers. Why are you putting Ghislaine Maxwell in a minimum security prison? Why did you send your personal lawyer to talk to her rather than an actual prosecutor? Why have we not seen that tape that we now find out didn't didn't need to have a minute cut out of it. You guys just chose to have a minute cut out of it. Why haven't you released the documents? Why is Donald Trump's name in there 1,000 times? Why did you dispatch 1,000 FBI agents to redact it? These are all really compelling questions, and we don't have any more answers to any of them than we did a month ago. And now, by the way, even some of the more extreme versions of concern over how this is being handled have gotten more extreme. So the percentage of Americans that think that Donald Trump died by murder rather than suicide is now at 50%. Even 51% of Republicans believe that he was murdered, okay? And so you might think that Joe Biden had him murdered or whatever, but even if you think that, which is ridiculous, but even if you think that, why is Donald Trump covering up for that murder? Very suspicious. And so they have tried so many different distractions to get people off their back over this thing. And one of the most obvious has been Tulsi Gabbard and her Obama Russia coup thing or whatever. And Donald Trump has pretended from the very beginning that that's just her doing her job. She's just pursuing whatever leads make sense. Turns out that was a lie, because Donald Trump personally gave the green light for Gabbard to take these highly classified documents and then reveal them very minimally redacted, even though the intelligence apparatus was saying, no, you can't release those. You're gonna burn our sources. Trump apparently cared way more about a really bad fumbling possible distraction for the Epstein thing than he did about America's intelligence capability. And so Gabbard, with Trump's blessing, overrode attempts by the CIA and other intelligence agencies to keep that material classified. Trump said, nope, put it out there. The document in question contains numerous references to CIA human sources reporting on plans invoked at the time by Vladimir Putin. Such sources are meant to be highly guarded by the agency, but Donald Trump doesn't care about American national security. He doesn't care about our intelligence agencies. He cares about himself. And so damn the sources, put it out or whatever. And it wasn't even a good distraction. It hasn't gotten anybody off the story. And so what a pointless waste of time this entire Tulsi Gabbard thing has been. What do you think, Yas?
Yeah, speaking real quick about the principles on the right, this issue was something that they built their entire personality off of, the MAGA movement. And from that, the QAnon movement sprung from this one very specific issue. Now, the portion of them that doesn't yet disapprove of the Trump administration's overall handling of these files, acts like it's just a really inconvenient headline, that it's just getting in the way of Trump doing what he came here to do. Never mind the fact that a big part of what he came here to do, what he campaigned on, what he promised his voters, was that he was going to release the Epstein files. Now, they've released some redacted files, and they said they weren't going to release anymore. Now they have some audio tapes, but they're currently redacting those before they release them. So they really are just they're doing everything but doing the one thing that they could do. And people are, understandably asking questions as to why don't they just do the thing? It'd be so much easier if they just did the thing that we're asking them to do. So
100%. By the way, apparently I had a misstatement. And I think I said, rather than Epstein being killed, that Trump had been. I apologize for mixing those two up. They are not the same person. It's easy to get them mixed up because they were best friends for decades and they had very similar personal lives and social circles and all that. And they're both in the Epstein files a whole bunch, but that does not make them the exact same person. At worst, accomplices to each other's crimes. Anyway, with that said, we're gonna take a short break. We'll be back with more news after this. Okay, we're gonna jump into some comments, see what's going on. I saved this from yesterday. By the way, we were in a real rush in the aftermath yesterday, so there were some super chats I didn't get to. I'm gonna read them now. Thank you to everybody who sent those in. Jojo Dragon had said, when is Trump gonna do a press conference about him lowering the rate of cat and dog eating way down? Yeah, weird that they no longer talked about that after the election. Maybe because it was never actually a thing at all. And yeah, the FBI, by the way, has confirmed that last year's violent and property crime rates were at 20-year lows. Just maybe the sort of thing that could have mattered in an election. We did what we could to make sure everyone knew the truth about that, but now they're revealing the data and it's out there. Anyway, let's see. Blanco Bull had posted a couple super chats to Sharon. Thank you for the messages. Let's keep it on the level with our co-hosts, particularly our female co-hosts, everyone. But thank you for the messages. I do support, I do approve, or I appreciate the support. Two Kisses says, hi, John. So what if Ghislaine Maxwell takes a deal, gets pardoned, flees the country, writes a tell-all bestseller? I don't think that why would she do that? Like, I mean, that would be funny, but like, why do that? She will likely be pardoned. And then she'll just be partying again. She'll be off living her best life. I'm sure she'll be a millionaire again. Like, she's gonna have her life, and we're gonna be astounded by that, but we're gonna see if MAGA cares at all. I don't think that she needs to flee the country. Okay, James Gray says, so what you're saying is a convicted sex trafficker didn't see Trump do anything she thought was wrong? That feels more telling. Yeah, it's just, look, here is why you want an independent, or at least a semi-independent DOJ, and a president who's not going to constantly break the law and the Constitution for their own benefit. It is entirely possible that Ghislaine Maxwell is being honest when she says she never saw Trump do anything. But unfortunately for all of us, we just can't trust that, because she knows that if she says one thing, she's likely to get a pardon. If she says another, she's not. Like, does anyone doubt that? Does anyone doubt that Trump's pardon decision will be based on anything other than his own personal best interests? No, nobody believes that. Republicans don't believe that. That's what's so messed up about having such a fundamentally corrupt and small-minded president who has committed so many crimes in the past that he has to constantly violate the law to protect himself. Anyway, let's see. Katsu Kim says, did the 18-year-old know the 13-year-old before they turned 18? I know that it's statutory, but it seems gray. The 18-year-old just became an adult. The 13-year-old was still 13 though. 13 is very young, right? Like we can all agree on that, right? 13. I mean, that's the first teen. Like before that, it's not like there's other teen. You're 12. You're not even a teen when you're like 12. You're 13. You just became a teen. No, it's not. We're not having any conversations about whether the person was still in high school. Like, it's not okay. It's not okay. And this politician literally changed the law and then didn't even appropriately apply the changed law to protect a relative of theirs. That person should be booted from their office. There should not have to be a conversation about this. Anyway, Queen Victoria, in reference to my talk yesterday about working on my novel, says, make sure to mention your online following with numbers in your query letter. That's interesting. I had not done that years ago when I sent my query letters. Is that a thing that you do? Mm-hmm. I guess. Yeah. I'll have to look into that. But anyway, we'll be back with more news. Okay, we've got a lot to cover this hour, so I'm gonna try to pick up my pace as we launch into this important story.
Would you support Israel reoccupying all of Gaza as has been suggested by some Israeli officials?
Well, I don't know what the suggestion is. I know that we are there now trying to get people fed. That's what I'm focused on. As far as the rest of it, I really can't say. That's going to be pretty much up to Israel.
So that is Donald Trump giving the green light to Israel, which has been incredibly clear. This is not speculation. This is not conjecture. The official plan from the Israeli government is to eject every Palestinian from the bounds of Gaza and steal the entirety of the land. But Donald Trump would have you believe two things. One, that this guy who loved to talk about Sleepy Joe and all this stuff is happening and he doesn't know what's going on. Donald Trump, have you paid attention to his press conferences? He doesn't know about anything that's happening anymore. He doesn't know what's happening in Gaza. He doesn't know about Vance's Epstein dinner. It's all over his head. He didn't know about Todd Blanche talking to Ghislaine Maxwell. He didn't know about her moving to a minimum security prison. That dude is apparently, he would have you believe, the sleepiest geezer that's ever taken up space in the White House. Also, this guy who loves throwing his weight around on the international scene. I'm gonna tell Iran what the deal is. China's gonna comply with our economic will. When it comes to Israel, I don't know, it's gonna be up to them, whatever they wanna do. I just wanna get people fed, which is difficult for some reason that he's not identifying there, i.e. Israel stopping the aid from coming in. I can't do anything about it. It's just whatever Netanyahu wants, I suppose. But to be clear, all of his cover stories aside, he is giving the green light for the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. That's all that is. And this is not new. He has personally advocated for it before. He's going to allow it to happen, and it is indeed happening. Benjamin Netanyahu is launching a new military operation to occupy the entirety of the Gaza Strip as a prelude and pretext to setting up the humanitarian city where they're gonna cram 1.5 million Palestinians in like the size of Bridgeport, Connecticut or whatever. That's what he's working on right now. And Donald Trump is saying, you do you, boo. If you want to ethnically cleanse this land, I am utterly impotent to stop you. That is Donald Trump. Yaz, what do you think?
I think a lot of things. I'm so glad that you made that point about Trump not knowing anything, John, because like I thought I was losing my mind. Like this man has no idea what's going on with anything in his administration anymore. Every time members of the press ask him about something, specifically dealing with some of the most contentious aspects of his presidency and his administration, he has no idea. Plausible deniability does not work when you are the president, right? He didn't even know about what RFK Jr. was up to whenever he decided to cut a whole bunch of funding. I believe it was $500 million from mRNA research. And I know that's going to be a big deal here in Texas where they do a lot of that kind of stuff. But it's also like, how did you not know about that? Because that was actually one of Trump's big policy pushes during his first administration. So also, I don't know why he would say, oh, I don't know, it's pretty much up to Israel. It's not up to Israel. Nothing is ever just up to Israel because we are the ones who are funding Israel. We're the ones giving them all of our money and all of our weaponry. It's not up to Israel, it's up to us. And it's up to some other players on the world stage, but a lot of it is up to us. So the fact that Trump is even pretending that he has no control over the situation is ridiculous. And everyone knows it at this point. Even a lot of Republicans are starting to realize that this is not a good look. I think there was a difference for a while between the left and the right. Nobody supported the United States giving money to Israel except for very staunch Israel supporters. On the left, we tended to think, like that's a genocide that's happening over there. We don't want to fund a genocide. Also stop giving all of our money to Israel. And on the right, they were like, stop giving all of our money to Israel because America first. So either way, there wasn't a whole lot of support for Israel and all of the funding that we're giving to them among the American people. But very undemocratically, the United States Congress and the executive branch, they just do whatever they want anyway. They know that they don't have the support of the people. They know that they don't have the support of their constituents, but they still do it anyway because they're bought and sold by AIPAC and everyone knows that. And honestly, it's embarrassing for them. It makes them look not like the strong man on the block, on the global world stage. But instead, we're just like, there's a tiny country somewhere in the Middle East, thousands of miles away from here. And they're the ones who are calling all the shots. And our president, our big, strong president, he's like, I don't know, like whatever they want to do, I guess they can just do it.
Yeah, 100%. No, he looks like a total failure. I mean, it would be one thing if he was doing what he's done the rest of this time. Well, like that, people can starve, I don't care. Now he's saying we're trying to feed them. Okay, well then in that case, you're failing. You're failing because Israel doesn't want them to be fed. They're stopping you, and there's nothing you can do apparently. Makes you look like a little bitch is what it makes you look like. Because when Iran was defying you, oh, we're gonna send in the bombers. Oh, we're gonna send the bombers. India's buying Russian oil. Oh, we're gonna jack up the tariffs or whatever. Netanyahu stops you from delivering sandwiches. I guess it's whatever Israel wants. There's nothing I can do about it. And again, whether it makes you look like a little bitch to us doesn't matter. The issue is that more and more MAGA people think that when it comes to your relationship with Netanyahu, you are a submissive little bitch, and it's more and more obvious every day. Now that said, let's lighten the tone a little bit, talk about something ridiculous, and we're gonna get started with this. Chris Cuomo decided to slam Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez after falling for possibly the most obvious deep fake ever generated. Take a look.
Sydney Sweeney looks like an Aryan goddess, and the American Eagle Jeans campaign is blatant Nazi propaganda. I mean, watching that sultry little temptress squeeze into a Canadian tuxedo, 3 sizes too small, with her bouncy little fun bags on the screen staring at you, piercing through the core of your soul with those ocean blue eyes that could resurrect the Führer from his grave in Argentina. is something that should alarm every American citizen, because in America, beauty is not defined by whiteness. Oh no, it is defined by the number of victim groups of which you are a member. Skinny, attractive, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, cisgender women descend from the slave daddy oppressors of this nation. And any man who cranks one out while thinking about a woman like this probably hates Black people, probably hates gay people, and they certainly hate the diversity of our great nation. So I say, instead of simping for the Sydneys, we should be celebrating the Shaniquas. Instead of worshiping the hot, straight blonde, what about the obese alphabet, people with blue hair? They need love too. And to all the haters who say companies that go woke, go broke, I'd rather be poor than a Nazi.
I actually agree with that final point. But aside from that, how could anyone think that's real? I mean, my God. Mitch McConnell knows that that's fake, okay? There are people who died years ago that are like, that seems a little bit suspicious. I don't like AOC or whatever, but that's suspicious. Instead, Chris Cuomo saw that and decided to repost it. He put his stamp on it and said nothing about Hamas or people burning Jews' cars, but Sweeney Jean's ad deserved time on floor of Congress. What happened to this party? Fight for small business, not for small culture wars. Thought it was real. What better clue do you want? The swinging fun bags, the cranking one out, the alphabet blue hair. Somebody please check on Chris Cuomo, because how could you possibly think that that's real? Well, he left it up, by the way, until she finally responded saying, this is a deep fake, dude. Please use your critical thinking skills. At this point, you're just reposting Facebook memes and calling it journalism. And at this point, look, you gotta backtrack, and there's good ways to do it and there's bad ways to do it. You know, if you believe something that turns out to be fake news, whether deep fake or otherwise, take ownership of it, take responsibility. But he couldn't really do that. Like, he says, you're correct, that was a deep fake, but it really does sound like you. No, Chris, it doesn't sound like anyone. It sounds like a crappy cartoon the Daily Wire would script or something. You thinking not just that that's real, but that sounds like her, that's the actual problem. And that's, by the way, the reason they made it. Because they know there's some people that want to believe it. It's burning inside of them, their desire to see AOC like that. And so, by the way, but now to the central claim. Show me you calling on Hamas to surrender or address it. No, that's not the central claim. The central claim is that a journalist is spreading an obvious fake video. Don't try to distract from it. Don't try to turn it to something else. Take ownership, apologize to your following, and promise to do better in the future. But he didn't do that. And so she did respond and said, because by the way, he didn't even reply to her with that. He just posted it. So she said, I'm going to assume you were trying to reply to me and burp this tweet into the ether instead. You seem to struggle with knowing how to write an apology. Do you need help? Maybe you should call someone, which is definitely true. And yeah, look, I just want to point out one more thing before I get in yes. So the right wants you to believe that every left-winger and every elected Democrat lost their mind about Sydney Sweeney, which is not the case in a couple different ways. First of all, you can identify, as we did on the show, that this was obvious trying to appeal to right-wingers with the race science thing. That's not criticizing Sydney Sweeney. They tried to conflate those two things. But even if you think that those are the same thing, I did not see a single elected Democrat talking about this. They didn't put out any ads about it. They didn't talk about it on the House floor about it. That's why they had to make a deep fake about it. Do you get that, Chris? That the Democrats weren't falling for a culture war thing. That's why they needed to use AI. No, it was the right that was jumping in to the culture war stuff. That's why, according to Media Matters, they used Sydney Sweeney's name 100 times more than Epstein. It was a convenient culture war thing and a distraction from the Epstein cover-up. And you participated in it, buddy. Yaz, what do you think?
Yeah, Chris Cuomo, he really fell off since he got dropped by CNN. I feel like ever since then, he's been having some serious like identity crisis issues. Like he doesn't know who he is anymore. He doesn't know what side he's on anymore. And AOC is right. This is not journalism on his part. And as far as I know, he still identifies and is working as a journalist. But to your last point, the fact that the Republicans have been trying to make this such a big issue, they tried to make a culture war out of it. And like the Democrats, I haven't really been seeing them saying a whole lot about it. Like, yes, there are pockets of people who are saying that this is, eugenics and this is propaganda, whatever. But generally, especially coming from the party itself, you haven't seen a whole lot of that. And, the fact that Chris Cuomo said it does kind of sound like you, though. No, it doesn't. It sounds like a caricature of what the right thinks the left is. And that's not it really is not representative of most of what I have experienced as most of the people on the left. It's very reductive, it's dismissive, and it's like he's badgering the left to be better than they are, even though his version of what they are is not actually what they are. So it's all over the place. And the fact that he also responded to the tweet without actually retweeting AOC, it's just funny. Like, just be better, Chris. Or get off the internet. Take a break. If you need a break, take a break. And then one last point I want to make, the fact that he is a seasoned journalist and he did not recognize this as a deep fake, as AI, even though it was so obvious that that is exactly what it is. It just goes to show that we're entering into a very, very uncertain time right now with AI and with all these deep fakes. And a lot of the people, specifically the older generations, like I would say boomers and up, right? They are the ones who are on Facebook and they're seeing all this AI generated content. And whenever you talk to them, and I have talked to a few boomers and they all told me the same thing. They said, oh no, but you can tell what's fake and what isn't. And I said, no, you can't, I can barely tell some of the time, and I'm a solid millennial. I grew up with the internet. I watched it transform from one thing to another. And even for millennials, Gen Z, Gen X, we have a hard time sometimes distinguishing between what is real and what isn't. The only difference is that sometimes we're a little bit quicker to ask, is this real or is this not? Yeah. But you have people like Chris Cuomo, it's so obvious that this was fake. And he still, even her mouth wasn't moving at the same time as the audio, it was so telling that it was fake. And he retweeted it as fact.
Yeah, it makes me really uncomfortable. Somebody needs to talk to him.
It should.
Anyway, we're gonna take a break. By the way, eventually, the deepfakes are going to be better in terms of how they look. And someone will script one that will be at least somewhat subtle. And it will go viral. And a lot of us are worried about that and how it might influence elections. But they don't even have to do that. They don't even have to make it subtle. They don't even have to make it convincing. By the way, go on Facebook, because I imagine most people don't, and see the obvious AI images that get 70,000 likes. Nobody apparently on the internet has any apparatus whatsoever to determine what is real and what is fake, because you will have some weird animal creature holding up a piece of art made of coconuts or whatever, and people will be like, that's amazing, how talented, or whatever. And that's not a human. How do you think that's real? And these people,
there's a lot of AI Jesus content as well that gets a lot of likes. But also, John, you have to speaking of what's real and what's fake, you have to remember that Zuckerberg literally said that he was going to be flooding his platform with bots. So are those likes even real? You can't trust anything anymore.
Yeah, 100%. Is Chris Cuomo a bot?
Is he real?
I don't know. Makes sense. I don't know. Zach says, John is looking peppy today. It's like his haircut has given him a spring in his step. Well, I got a little bit more sleep the last 2 nights. My dog still woke me up multiple times and I still had a little bit of insomnia, but I had relatively more sleep. So I just have a dull pressure behind my eyes. I don't have a burning behind my eyes today. So I do feel a little bit better, actually. Anyway, with that said, let's jump into some comments. Stickman Grit says, for 666 Day, when our counter hit 666, swap out all the music for metal. Also, Roman's a Trump supporter, Sharon. I don't know if Roman Reigns is a Trump supporter. He has said something that can be interpreted as that. I don't know for sure. I don't want to say definitively that he is. Okay, let's see. Gargle Dragon says in a super chat, Texas Republican voters are the salt of the land, John. The clay of the new West. You know, morons. What's that from? Is that from Blazing Saddles? I think it's from Blazing Saddles. Shout out to my Texas friends. Beto might be cringe, but he's a good guy. Yeah, he's maybe the most cringe Democrat actually in the country. Like he's on like a, I don't know, like I don't know if anybody matches him, but I do think some of his instincts are good. There are way worse people, okay? That's all.
It is Blazing Saddles, by the way. I just watched that again recently.
Oh, did you? That's awesome.
Yeah, okay.
Do you think Beto's not in elected office? Do you think we could get Beto on the show?
He would come. Yeah,
Maybe?
So this isn't like a flex or anything, but like I met him somewhat recently. It was probably a couple years ago, actually. And I was like, oh yeah, I work with the Young Turks. And he's like, oh, I love them. He'll come.
Interesting. Okay, we should reach out to him. Let's see. I mean, he's pretty progressive.
Yeah, like I told you, like he's kind of corny, he's kind of cringe, whatever. But like honestly, I think he's like a good person who's actually trying to do good things. And a lot of times here in Texas, when our actual elected officials don't do anything, he's on the ground organizing. Like he does a lot of really good stuff, or he's trying to. And I will give him all the credit in the world for that.
Good, yeah. And right now, I think he's in that perfect like position where he's progressive enough that we want him on the show, but he hasn't gotten elected, so he might come on the show. Once they get in there, there's no chance. So we got to grab him now while we can.
We'll tell him
anyway, now that I'm done with my brief pity party, Neil Whittington says, when I was singing in Messiah in the 80s, we had a song called Kill Them All and Let God Sort Them Out. DJT and Netanyahu regimes remind me of it. Yeah, I'm vaguely familiar with that song, actually. Yeah. More news. Okay, I am hopeful that we can get through these two stories, starting with this.
When you do testing to that extent, you're going to find more people, you're going to find more cases. So I said to my people, slow the testing down, please.
Remember that? It was a fun little throwback to when he willfully allowed more people to get sick and die in COVID. But it is actually a stance of his that has maintained to the current day that he does not want data that he does not like. And so you might recall that just a few days ago, he fired the Commissioner of Labor Statistics after they provided weaker than expected jobs figures. But that is not the only way that he is trying to stop data from coming out that could potentially hurt him or his rich buddies. And this is a story that's not going to be reported nearly as widely, but it is very important, arguably more important. And so he has apparently asked NASA employees to draw up plans to end at least 2 major satellite missions. If the plans are carried out, one of the missions would be permanently terminated because the satellite would burn up in the atmosphere. The other wouldn't burn up, it's attached to the ISS, but they would stop using it. In fact, they would allow a private company to take it over rather than the government continuing to gain data from that satellite. So why would you want to stop these 2 satellites? Well, he doesn't like the data that they collect, or at least corporations and wealthy donors don't like the data that it's collected. So basically, it's designed to monitor planet warming greenhouse gases. So emissions of things like carbon and stuff like that. It can take a look and it can figure out how much is being generated. And it's very important, by the way. The US Department of Agriculture currently uses the data to forecast and track crop yield, drought conditions, and more, as in addition to just the carbon stuff. But they don't want that because that information shows where more carbon is being emitted. It potentially shows where particular corporations are emitting carbon. And the data that it provides could be used by scientists or by policymakers to limit those sorts of emissions in the future. And so they're just gonna kill it. And it's not just like pro-ignorance, anti-science, doing something about climate change. It's also financially stupid. The 2 missions cost about $750 million to design, build, and launch. Now, though, it only costs about $15 million per year to run them. That's about 1.5 Donald Trump weekend golf trips for a year of operating these 2 satellites. But they're just gonna burn them up. And likely when we get a sane president back in office, we're gonna have to again spend the better part of $1 billion to put them up there. But this is our president. This is the effect he's having on our ability to know what's actually going on with our planet. Yes, what do you think?
Oh my God. Yeah. So like I live in Houston. I don't just live in Houston. I live in NASA, Houston, right? Like it's down the road. My husband works there. And again, it's not a flex. It's like a lot of the people who live in this area are in some way, shape, or form employed by the NASA complex. And it was like such a cool thing. It is such a cool thing. We're the space city. It's something that the people of Houston take a lot of pride in, right? Even across the city, right? This is the space city. And it's been weird lately, and like part of the crux with NASA is that it is federally funded, it is publicly funded, and so we're always trying to like fight the government to get the funding that we need to push for certain initiatives. And of course, things get politicized whenever you're dealing with public money, and people say, "Oh, we need to spend our money elsewhere. That's not important." They don't understand the kind of work that NASA actually does and how much research it actually puts forth, not just for space travel, but for use in various other just industries and things like that. So now what has happened is since the government doesn't want to fund programs at NASA, they have to look for private funding instead. And where do they have to look? They have to look at Elon Musk and SpaceX. They have to look at Jeff Bezos with Blue Origin. They have to look at the Virgin guy, Richard Branson, right? They have to look at all of these like terrible billionaire people. And I said it in a video or something before that like Elon Musk has somehow managed to make space in Houston less cool than it was. And that is like a significant accomplishment. And sorry, I'm trying to think of like, never mind. I won't say what I was going to say, but it is very, very tricky. And it's very heartbreaking to watch, to know that people are going to get laid off from these positions. This is a job that people have spent their entire lives dreaming of, right? Like people grow up and they want to go work for NASA. They want to go be around the astronauts and they're there, right? They're right here in Houston. And it's very sad because they're just going to lose their jobs over something that is so innate and so just stupid. It's very, very dumb. It's completely dismissive of people's entire life's work, and it's hard to watch.
Yeah, 100%. I'm very curious now what you almost said but didn't say, but you don't have to. And I will say that when you were listing billionaires and trying to come up with the name of the Virgin guy, I was like, are you talking about like Elon Musk's assistants at Doggy or something like that? But okay, Richard Branson, who is notably not a virgin. Anyway, right. It's disgusting what they've done, and they've tried to destroy NASA as much as possible while putting all of this money in these private corporations, which is that's just what Republicans do. That's not even a new thing. That's not even a MAGA thing. That's what they always do. And why should the government be generating this data when instead we could, even if we wanted it, we could pay 10 times as much for a private corporation to do it. This is what you get when you put a Republican in the White House. When there's a public health crisis, stop the testing. When there's a climate crisis, don't track how much carbon emissions we're having. It is an explicitly stupid and ignorant ideology. And as I've always said, they like to claim that they're masculine or whatever. I've often said there is nothing alpha, there's nothing masculine about being dumb as hell, okay? And so it's unfortunate that we're not gonna have that information. You could have paid for these missions for like 2 of Trump's terms for the price of his birthday parade that he had. But instead, we got the saddest little parade a dictator's ever thrown. Anyway, with that said, I think we only have like the better part of a minute or so. So I'm gonna read a comment or two and we're gonna see what's going on. Steph Wilson says, RIP crypto, damn you, Kristi Noem. I think that's a reference to South Park. I think that they had some stuff about Kristi Noem. I didn't actually see it yet, so I don't know it, but I do know that they talked about her. Mr. Big J says in a super chat, Democrat states should be preemptively voting to gerrymander right now to be triggered if Texas does, so they have time to do it before the deadlines. Well, I believe that's the way that Gavin Newsom is doing, is that it's gonna be a trigger thing. If they do it, it will happen. I agree. Or, you know what? Just do it. Don't be reactive, be proactive, okay? And eventually we'll get to the independent redistricting commission that every sane person knows that we need. But until then, we're facing a fascist takeover of the government, Anyway, I think that's probably about it for the first hour. Lots to talk about in the aftermath, so don't go anywhere. Yaz and I will be back after this. Welcome back to the Aftermath, one and all. We got some news for you. First, a couple comments. Magic Monstera's been here for 8 months on YouTube as a subscriber. Says, cheers to 8 months of being able to afford a membership. Super nice of you, thank you. And for those who can't, thank you to everybody who gifts membership. It is, I'm sure, much appreciated by the people who receive it. Jan Foolery, member for 55 months, says, I liked and shared the stream. Thanks for bringing the news to me in a way that doesn't make me want to peel my face off. Gross, and you're welcome. I also saw, it hasn't been transferred over yet, but McLander, member for 45 months, their son Sterling is having their first birthday. Says, thanks for always inspiring me to be a better dad to my little silver dragon. That's adorable, and happy birthday to little Sterling. My daughter's birthday is actually coming up in just 1 week. She's turning 2, and we're very excited for it.
Wow.
Okay, well, with that said, let's turn now. We're not gonna talk about my daughter anymore. Let's talk about Andy Biggs's daughter, starting with this.
There are a lot of really good women in office.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to hate on anyone. I even like some really good congresswomen. I don't think women should hold office in general. Like, it's a man's position. Yeah. That's my stance. I think women should, run the home.
That was Miley Biggs, 25-year-old daughter of Arizona Representative Andy Biggs, one of Trump's biggest supporters, does not believe women should hold elected office, or at least that's what she said before. Now, she would very much like to hold elected office, okay? She's running for the state Senate for the 14th Legislative District. And is she gonna be running on her stance that she alone, I guess, is a woman who can be allowed to hold political office, or is she just coasting off of Andy Biggs' name? Probably more of the latter at this point. But anyway, let's talk a little bit more about her opinions on women and their role in the world. She said, honestly, I don't know if I would vote for any female. Just some advice to her potential constituents, by the way. I don't know if females should be in office, okay? Now, she was younger when she said that. It was last August, I guess. She wasn't 13 or anything. She expressed concerns about how modern feminism has changed society, starting with women's right to vote. So evidently, it's not just holding office that she has an issue with. She's in the Ann Coulter camp. She says, I hate a 9-to-5 schedule, before saying that a domesticated life was something that appealed to her. I get home and I don't want to do anything else. Like, women aren't built for this. I just want to be a wife. I just want to be a mom. And I just want to say, is it possible that you're not built for it? And that's fine. You can be a wife and you can be a mom. I don't even say just. I think those are fine things to be. I think being a husband and being a dad are great. No justs necessary. But just because that's what you want to do, does that necessarily mean that that's what every woman should be legally allowed to do? You can just be a stay-at-home mom. You don't have to go on podcasts to advocate that no other woman hold elected office or perhaps be able to vote at all. And finally, in December of last year, she went back on that podcast to say, talking about the results of the 2024 election. She said, have you seen the ones where it's like if women were the only ones to vote, what it would look like, and it's literally 80% blue? It's like, whoa, repeal the 19th Amendment. And so I'm left wondering, is it her like honest ideological stance that women are just too dumb to vote? Or does she just do this for pragmatic reasons? I don't like it because most women vote for Democrats. So for that reason, I think they should be barred for voting. I don't know which of those explanations is the true one, but thankfully they both suck. Yaz, what do you think?
Yeah, it all sucks. Like, what an idiot. I can't take these people seriously. And I don't like that I am, or that anyone really is expected to, because these are not serious people. This is a child who is still like developing her own thoughts and her ideas about the world. And, typical, like they think they have it all figured out. And I know I sound like an old lady when I say this, but like, you don't know as much as you think you know about the world, because it's all so simple and small-minded, right? Like, I'm not built for a 9-to-5 job either. I tried it, it wasn't for me. I was bad at it, so I found a different job. And now I have financial independence, even though I am married. And, not to make this about me, but, I do a lot of that trad wife stuff. I do a lot of the stuff in the house. I think actually Waz called me the TYT trad wife, which I'm fine with, because I do, I cook, I bake, I sew, I do all these things that like trad wives do, but I still just, you still have to forge your own path. And that's all that feminism is the option to forge your own path instead of having your path dictated for you. And the fact that men do not have these limitations on them and never really have at any point in history, that is not fair. And all we want as women is the fact to choose for ourselves. And why is that such a controversial thing that we have to keep talking about it? It's all so dumb. And the people who perpetuate these ways of thinking, it's like, look, if you can't, expand your own thinking beyond where it is, but beyond this very, very restricted, constricted way of thinking, that shouldn't be my problem. But instead, we have people like this who are on podcasts because, what do they say? The barrier to entry is a little too low these days, right? We have these people who are now considering running for public office. And unfortunately, they appeal to other people who are just as small-minded as they are.
Yeah.
And really, it's like a psychological thing, Like if you see someone who is doing something that you think you can't do, you say, you know what? I'd rather if nobody was able to do that, because then I wouldn't feel as bad about myself. It's like whenever you have a uniform in school, then you can't feel bad between the kids because one kid has better clothes than the other one. It's the same kind of psychology. And if that is your own limiting belief, then deal with it. That's your problem and it shouldn't be my problem.
Exactly. Look, they of course have convinced themselves that no, feminists are lying when they say it's about choice. No, they're saying you have to work, which is, again, not what they're saying. I'll never understand arguing against a position by implying that they mean the opposite of what they keep saying for years and years and years. But she doesn't understand that, except that she clearly does, because last year she was saying they shouldn't be allowed to hold office, and then she thought about it and decided, no, I want to hold office. Clearly you understand the choice between those two things. But also, just she could well end up winning. I mean, I imagine that all that stuff is gonna be an ads against her or whatever. But for anybody that has thought about running for office and then decided, it's just too difficult or it takes too much money or who am I to run? I've even once or twice thought about it. And I've thought about all the issues with that. Meanwhile, she leaves college for a year, goes on dumb podcasts, says stupid ass things. And then she's like, well, I do have the last name of a congressman. Maybe I'll get into the state senate or whatever. That is the entitlement and ignorance that greases the wheel. Maybe she's in a red enough district that it could actually work. What a pathetic democracy we're in. Anyway, with that said, we have other stuff to talk about. So why don't we move on to this? Elon Musk's favorite baby is up to no good again. And no, I'm not talking about one of the many spawn he's created with his employees or whatever. No, I'm talking about Grok, okay? The thing that is the wave of the future for Elon Musk. He's taking money out of all of his other businesses and throwing it into Grok. And I'm not talking here about it declaring itself Mecha Hitler. No, it decided to start offering up nude photos it generated of Taylor Swift without even being asked for it, by the way. And this is a product of Grok Imagine, which has been rolled out this week to Apple users. And 34 million images have been generated in the space of just 48 hours. Okay, so in 2 days, 34 million images have been generated. God only knows how much water and electricity has been used. And I will just point out, not a single goddamn one of those images needed to be generated. But we've burned through a lot of resources for it. And by the way, if you'd like this, you just have to purchase the $30 Super Grok subscription, which you can also set on fire like we're setting our environment on fire. It's a total waste of money, but feel free to do it. And so there's 4 different presets that you can use: custom, normal, fun, and spicy. And of course, it was always gonna go in this direction. Elon Musk's fans are both the horniest and least affable men in America. Obviously, he's gonna try to appeal to them in this particular way. And so Grok Imagine allows users to take some of the most famous women on the planet and put them in a state of undress. So what they did was, they asked for images of Taylor Swift celebrating Coachella with the boys, with the spicy thing activated. They didn't say I want nudity or whatever, but it just started doing it, okay? And it apparently did it for other people as well. Scarlett Johansson, it would put in her underwear and stuff like that. But for others, there's no guardrails whatsoever. I guess Taylor Swift has been outspoken in support of Democrats, and so she's not protected from that sort of thing. And this is a paid service that has investors putting money into it. There are advertisements on Twitter next to these sorts of things. And all of this, I guess, is just how you run a business. You generate non-consensual nude images of notable celebrities, opening yourself up to God knows how many lawsuits. By the way, the only way you can generate any of these images is that you've stolen photographs and trained your model on them. All of this is just terrible, but this is what America's like in 2025. Yaz, what do you make of it?
This is dumb as hell. Like, look, if we're creating 34 million images, where is the value there, right? So we have deluded ourselves to believe that quantity is more important than quality. And this is something that we have come to believe as a matter of capitalism, right? With capitalism, you only ever have upward growth. There's only ever an upward trajectory, and any kind of shrinkage that happens or any kind of corrections, any kind of come down, that's seen as a very, very bad thing always, right? Even though it's a very, very natural thing, right? Things need to die, right? Things need to grow and then they need to come down, right? What goes up comes down. That is a natural thing. We understand that, except when it comes to capitalism, only upward growth. And this is kind of, an offshoot of that, right? The more we have, the better. The more content that's on the internet, the better. The more longer videos, the better. The more short form videos, the better, right? Just keep pumping it out. We have to store it all somewhere, and all of this is really killing our planet. And for what? Just for these dumb images. Like, why do people? What are they doing? Never mind. I'm not going to ask what they're doing. Yeah. I'm sorry that I went down that path, John. I'll be very, very transparent with the fact that I've gotten to be very anti-technology lately, and I know that I make my living on the internet in part, but I don't like it. Right? I don't like social media. I don't like AI. I don't like my phone anymore. I don't like any of it. Right? And I understand before Taylor Lorenz comes after me or something, I get that this is me personally. And I understand that this is the world that we live in now. And this is what it's going to be going forward. I get that. I don't like it, but I get that. But at the same time, I don't love the fact that we're using so much of our resources for the planet, the actual physical planet, not the digital world, but the actual physical planet. Because I think people forget that even though stuff is existing on the cloud or whatever, that's so nebulous that people don't really understand what it means. But things still have to exist somewhere in reality. And where those things exist is in the use of our planet's resources to power all these things. I'm assuming that over time, these these AI programs and things like that are going to become a lot less consumptive of our resources, are going to be able to run a lot more efficiently than they are now. And I can't wait for that. But in the meantime, this all feels very, very wasteful, and it hurts to see, and I don't understand the point of it, and I wish it didn't exist, and I hate it.
Yeah, I disagree that it's likely to become less consumptive. Mark Zuckerberg is talking about setting up a data center the size of Manhattan. You don't get that going without a lot of electricity. Maybe, we'll see. But this is what he's providing.
A lot of them are investing in nuclear. They're looking into that, nuclear energy.
Sure. Yeah. I think it is no coincidence that Taylor Swift is not protected from this sort of thing on there. Not only the Donald Trump stuff, but Elon Musk had previously tweeted about wanting to impregnate her or whatever. And the issue fundamentally is not that guys want this stuff. They do and they will. And I would say to those guys, if any are watching, if you would like to ever be within 50 feet of an actual living, breathing, flesh and blood woman, stop following Elon Musk. You will increase your stock in the dating pool 1,000-fold if you just stop caring about Elon Musk and using his products. The issue though is, so long as people keep investing in his AI stuff, when all it can produce is anti-Semitism and non-consensual nudes or whatever, he's gonna keep doing it. As long as he keeps overhyping by literally years and tens of thousands of dollars what his cars are gonna be like at Tesla, as long as people keep investing in it, even though he keeps lying to them, spitting in their face, they're gonna keep doing it. And we talked earlier on the show about how SpaceX is now becoming much more of an Elon Musk company in failing to hit these benchmarks and timelines and all that stuff. So long as you can keep failing over and over and over again with your robo-taxis and with your cyber trucks and all that, but people for some reason keep investing in it because stocks have nothing to do with the real world, then there's not gonna be an accountability for this. It doesn't make any sense, but that's how it works as of right now. And I hope that she sues his ass off. I hope that she does. There's a reason that all of these other things, ChatGPT and all that, have very stringent safeguards. It's because they don't want to open themselves up to legal liability like this. Anyway, with that said, why don't we move on to one final story probably to close out the hour. JD Vance in the past couple of days apparently almost literally cried himself a river. See, he was going on yet another vacation, which he takes almost every week at this point, and his family went down to Ohio to celebrate his birthday, and they decided they wanted to do a boat trip down the Little Miami River, but the issue was the water was too low. Now, you and I would just do something else, but he decided, no, I want what I want, and I'm gonna use my position, and we're gonna literally change the river. And so that's what they did. Their team had the Army Corps of Engineers take the unusual step of changing the outflow of a lake in Ohio to accommodate his desire to go boating. The Secret Service requested the levels be changed to, quote, support safe navigation of US Secret Service personnel during the visit, but that's not what it was. It was so he could go kayaking on it, okay? He wanted to go kayaking for his birthday, and that's the river I want. And so screw the lake or whatever, I want to raise the level. And so the thing is, the Army Corps of Engineers does things like this sometimes for the public, okay? If there's a community river festival, emergency responder training, they don't generally do it because the vice president thinks it would be cool to kayak. And if you're a right winger and you don't have a problem with this, and I'm sure that you don't because JD Vance, what if Kamala Harris had been like, I wanna go on another trip, change the outflow of that lake or whatever? You guys would never have stopped talking about it. Well, now your boy is doing that. So let's see a little bit of consistency in this case. And again, he just went to Disneyland like 2 weeks ago, and I know because he got booed out of it. He's apparently taking some sort of international trip now too. This dude barely goes back to DC long enough to coordinate with Pam Bondi about how they're gonna cover up the Epstein story or whatever, and then he's off on another vacation. It sure is a good time to be JD Vance. You barely have to work for your pay. Yaz, what do you think?
Yeah, and then he had to host a dinner with Pam Bondi and like Kash Patel and whoever, like he's been busy, John, this is like such a random reference, but when I first heard this story, you know what it reminded me of? Wow. I don't remember a whole lot from this movie except for really this one scene, but it was from Bruce Almighty, and he had a date and he wanted to impress her and like get her in the mood or whatever. And so what he did was he lassoed the moon in the sky with all of his god powers, and then he pulled the moon closer to make it look big and bright in the sky, and it was really impressive, and his date loved it. But then later in the movie, you saw that there was all these reports of like the tides were acting crazy and like the animals didn't know what to do because he messed with the tides because he pulled the moon closer. And at the time when he was doing it in the movie, it was like, oh, that's just like a cute thing that he did. But then you realize that, oh, these things have real world, real life consequences for so much wildlife, things that people really just don't even pay attention to anymore. Like they just think it's like, it's fine. They'll deal with it. They'll figure it out. And it's not the case, And I think that honestly, like one of the big problems that we have in this country is that we don't value life. We barely value life of other people, whether they're here or abroad. Like a lot of people can just look at what's happening in Gaza right now and not even like it just rolls off their back, like they don't even understand what they're seeing. They'll look at what's happening with people right here in this country with our immigrants. They'll look at people who are being displaced and destroyed in various conflicts around the world, and it doesn't even register with them. And then even with the wildlife, right? If they can't even understand the severity what's happening to other humans. I don't expect them to understand like how devastating it can be whenever you mess with ecosystems and whenever you mess with wildlife and all of the ramifications that come from that and all of the repercussions that come, no pun intended, but down the river from all of these things that we do,
Yeah.
like it's ridiculous that people don't even think about those things to me.
Yeah, I mean, one consequence is having the Army Corps of Engineer do all this. Does anyone think that that's free? No.
Yeah.
We're once again paying for their constant vacations, their constant golf trips and international trips, where they're making money. They're doing their business deals for their own personal businesses and everything. JD Vance is constantly jetting all over the place, doing all this. We pay for every one of those.
He's
Despite the fact that
flying
both of
everywhere.
them are
Why
rich.
can't he just fly to a river that's already up? Like,
Exactly.
I don't,
No,
like just
because
go
I want that one. No, Yaz, I want that one. I want a kayak on that one. So
Also,
you make
I
it
don't know why
happen.
the
Do whatever you
idea
gotta do.
of like JD Vance in a kayak is funny to me. Like,
I know.
it also like remember that one picture of Zuckerberg paddleboarding that was awkward, and it's just like just stay out of boats, stay off of the water. All these people, they're not cut out for it. Get off the water.
Exactly. Yeah. Let me just show briefly. I haven't seen the episode yet, but South Park apparently has now done a version of JD Vance, and he's appearing here with Donald Trump. I think they've done more accurate recreations before. I think they made him a little bit tall there. And I think they thinned him down a little bit. But other than that, I think it's not a bad depiction of JD Vance. The pathetic little henchman.
For Trump, they did do him a lot of favors because he is very svelte in the South Park episode. I noticed that the first time, and it's very obvious there too.
They definitely made him svelte. And also, like, those guys can take a lot of cheap shots, but like, to their credit, they made his penis at least twice as big as it is in real life. And so that was nice of them to do that. Anyway, that's all the time we have for the show today. Yaz, as always, a pleasure to have you broadcasting from Texas, the site of the redistricting fight of the century. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I love doing this show.
Thank you. We always love having you on. Everybody out there, tomorrow is Friday. Brett Ehrlich is going to be on the show, although he's not going to be here. He's going to be broadcasting from Netroots Nation, but he's going to be joining us remotely, which means we will be still doing the Garbage People of the Week. You can head over to the post tab and vote for the Garbage Person of the Week, the Hero of the Week as well. And I hope that many of you do. With all that said, stay safe out there, stay sane out there. We'll see you soon.